Good morning, church. My name is Dan. Good to see everyone here today. And today's Bible reading is Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30, and it's from the New Revised Standard Version. For it is as if a man, going on a journey, summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. At once the one who had received the 5 talents went off and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in the few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter. So I was afraid, and I went, hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave, you knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for his worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. May the Lord bless his words.
Well, good morning. My name is Dave Herron, and today our text is on the parable of the talents. In the early 1980s, a film was released around the world that was literally God's gift to sermon writers everywhere, especially people preaching on the parable of the talents. The film was a true story of a young Scottish runner called Eric Liddell competing in the 1924 Paris Olympics. It had sport and drama and tension, and it was about Liddell working out what it meant to serve Christ with his natural abilities and his hard work. Now, I'm sure this part of the room will know exactly the film I'm talking about. Of course, it's Chariots of Fire. There's just so much to love about this film. It opens with this sweeping and stunning and iconic running scene along the beach of St. Andrews in Scotland. Then there's the radical soundtrack, 1980s electronic synth by Vangelis, that really helps lift the story out of the 1920s into the present and makes it feel modern and relevant. Then for me, it was the first film I can remember seeing that had faith at its heart without being trite or cringy. It actually went on to win Best Picture at the Oscars. But why do sermon writers love it? Because It's a film about faith and talent and calling and moral courage. It's about putting God first and triumph. And if you put it all together with the parable of the talents, it is so easy to wrap it all up in a neat and tidy package and preach a scary sermon that sounds like this. Jesus expects you to take the natural abilities he has given you and invest them for his service. Look at how Eric Liddell did it. Oh, and by the way, there will be a final exam and doom awaits you if you are found wanting. Amen. Go in peace. That's the sermon that I'm sure many of us have heard. But here's the problems with that. First, it doesn't do justice to the time and the place and the people that Jesus was actually speaking to. Second, it ignores the big story that Jesus was speaking into. And third, it doesn't speak to the disabled and the challenged and the weary and the burdened. Another reason is more personal. When I heard that sort of sermon as a kid, it left me with this fear about not doing enough for Jesus in time for the final exam. And my one lousy talent back then was probably dislocating my thumb in a way that would freak out little kids. And that was never going to be an Olympic sport. How could I possibly pass the final exam? So this morning, I want to be careful with this text. I want to preach the great calling at its heart and the gifting that fits that call and the joy of connecting those two things together. And I want to hear in a new way the sharp edge of warning that Jesus includes at the end. Calling, gifting, joy, and warning. Let's get ready to run. We're in for a wild race for 20 minutes. Imagine the scene. It's the week before Passover, and Jesus and his followers have traveled up to Jerusalem for the festival, just like many, many others. But there is tension in the air. Jesus has been urgent and direct in his speech, and it will get him in trouble. It's like the gloves are off. Gone are the days of keeping things quiet. Now he's being direct and challenging. My wife and I recently watched the latest season of The Chosen, a series that dramatizes the life of Jesus from the perspective of his disciples. And one of the things that last season does well is it gives you a real sense of how dangerous and urgent Jesus' speech was in the week before his crucifixion. He knew what was coming, and he was trying to prepare his disciples, but at the same time, he was not holding back. So you get words like these from Matthew 23. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves don't enter, nor will you let those who enter who are trying to. Or this. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, cumin. But you've neglected the more important matters of the law, justice and mercy and forgiveness and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former, you blind guides. You strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. There are 5 more woes in that speech, and it's fair to say they're even more full on than those two. On the spectrum of uncomfortable Jesus, this was him set right out there at max. And in the middle of that tension, he drops our parable and he starts it like this. It's as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. So what's going on here? Who's the master, the slaves? What's the property? Scholar and theologian N.T. Wright makes the point that the hearers in front of Jesus would have heard this language and immediately understood he was talking again to the leaders of Israel, using a story to say something very, very pointed, like this. Yahweh entrusted you with a great calling to be a light to the nations, and he gifted you for that call with the law and the prophets and the presence of God himself. And instead of being faithful to that call, you buried it. Woe to you, Israel. So what's the heart of the matter? I want to say that at its heart, this parable is about focusing on the wrong things. Focusing on the wrong things. This week, I was traveling and staying in the third floor of a hotel up north. One day, I got back after a long day of work, entered the lift with other people, badged my room card, went to the number 3. The pressure was on, people were waiting, I was tired, it was that dangerous mix. And add to that, I could not see a thing. The control panel was this horrible shiny metal, and I didn't have these near vision glasses on, so I took a breath and just pushed my best guess button. And the doors immediately opened. I'd selected the floor that we were already on. There was an awkward silence in that group of strangers, and the guy beside me said, "Where do you want to go to, mate?" I was focused, or should I say unfocused, on the wrong thing. Specsavers has this genius marketing campaign about exactly this sort of thing. Yes, I should have gone to Specsavers. This is my favourite ad of theirs. It's a giant billboard that says, "Welcome to Perth," but they've set it on the drive out of the Adelaide airport. It just brilliantly plays into our anxiety of losing focus while travelling and ending up in the wrong place. Where do you want to go to, mate? So Jesus is saying, Israel, you've had a great call to be a light to the nations, and for that call you've been richly gifted, but you've focused on the wrong thing. Law for the sake of law, rules for the sake of rules, nationalism, looking inward, burying your call and your gifts. That path will end in darkness and weeping. I am now doing a new thing. And in the year 70 AD, that's exactly what happened. Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, and that path ended in darkness and sorrow. So let's talk about calling. What is your calling in life? And what does that even mean? The word calling comes from Old English. It's street language. And sometimes it helps to go back to the fancy, highfalutin source, which is Latin. In Latin, the word is vocatio, from which we get vocation. These days, vocation sort of means your job. But in those days, vocation and calling meant exactly the same thing. It meant a summons from God. These days, we talk about vocational choice, but in those days, that would have made no sense. A vocation is not something you choose. It's something you are summoned into by God himself. I'm not saying we shouldn't choose our work. I'm saying there's something richer and deeper going on here. Just like for ancient Israel, God has summoned you into a great calling and gifted you for that call. Your life is not your own. The person who really nailed this area is in an immensely helpful way is a Dutch man called Abraham Kuyper, born in 1837. Kuyper was a minister in the Dutch Reformed Church, but he had a very dry and liberal faith. And after leaving university, he served in his first parish, but there was a problem. There was a young woman in that parish, daughter of a miller, whom everyone spoke highly of for her alive evangelical faith. but she was boycotting his church services and meeting with a small group instead. So he went to visit her, and she wouldn't even shake his hand. But to his credit and hers, he kept visiting, seeking to understand the heart of her faith, and he went through a conversion experience that he described as the rise of the morning star in my life. And Kuyper went on to found a newspaper and work in education, found a university, and then he eventually became the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. He was so influential that the whole nation marked his 70th birthday, and it was said that for nearly 40 years, the history of the Netherlands could not be written without mentioning him. And there's one sentence that everyone quotes at the center of Kuyper's theology. It's this: there is not 1 square inch in the whole domain of human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. So when you step out of bed in the morning as a follower of Christ and ask, what am I called to do today? Kuyper would say, take the common grace of your human vocation made in the image of God from Genesis 1. Build the world, fill it, steward it, make it work. It's a call that's common to all people on earth. But then add to that the particular grace of what God has done in you and is doing in all creation, and then connect those two together. I'm in the mood for one-sentence summaries, so I'm going to compress this idea of calling into one sentence. I'd like to take some words from Tim Keller, The Drama of God's Redemption, and add a word from Kuyper, everywhere. Here it is: be part of the drama of God's redemption everywhere. So what's your calling? What is the job the Master leaves us to do? What has he gifted us for? As a follower of Christ, how should we use our talents and abilities and our days? Our calling is to be part of the drama of God's redemption everywhere. So what are talents, and how on earth did a story aimed at the religious leaders of Israel end up where it is now? It's actually really interesting, and it's an example of what scholars call lexical drift. It means that the way we read this parable has changed over time. And the word talent just started out meaning a massive unit of weight or currency. It's the amount of gold a laborer would earn in a lifetime. But the church shifted west, and the connection to Israel's story faded, and the meaning of talent shifted to mean word of God, then gifts from God. Then in the Middle Ages, the parable was so popular that the word talent entered everyday languages to mean our abilities gifted from God. In other words, it was this very parable that led to the word talent entering the English dictionary. How cool is that when you watch Britain's Got Talent on TV, or don't? The very language of being talented comes from Christian history and starts with this parable. But the big difference, of course, is that Christians have understood their abilities as gifts from God himself, part of what makes us beautifully, individually, specially created by him. But a modern dictionary will drop the God and just say talent, the ability to do something well. It's worth repeating. This Christian story is much richer and deeper and more life-giving way of living in the world than all of the competing options. Is there anything greater than Psalm 139? You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. Abraham Kuyper takes this idea of individual giftedness and he goes deep. He uses a word pluriformity, which means manyness. And he says the church should be an expression of the manyness of God. Diversity is an expression of God's generosity. And actually, uniformity is a curse of the modern age. Ephesians 2:10, you are God's masterpiece. So let's connect these dots. Our calling is great. Be part of the drama of God's redemption everywhere. Our gifts are many and varied. And we're asked to connect the two and stay focused. So if you're gifted at banking, bank. Like it's a holy calling. And let the drama of God's redemption play out in the way that you think about money and people and debt and need. If you're talented at farming, then farm. It's a holy calling. But let the drama of God's redemption affect the way that you treat God's land and his crops and his animals. If you're gifted at music, then play as a holy calling. And may the drama of God's redemption inspire you to bring your creativity and worship to him. If you take joy in teaching, then teach as a holy calling. Let the drama of God's redemption inform how you treat children as the image of God to be formed in wisdom and knowledge. And if your talent is engineering, then build. You're building the world, but let Christ, who is the Lord of engineering, inform how you think about technology and AI and what it means to be human. But let's be careful here. This is a story about faithfulness, not about taking the world by storm. It's about being faithful with our abilities and our disabilities, with our energy and our lack thereof. And let's be careful here. There is a place for God stretching us out of our context and out of our comfort into places where we feel out of place. That's the story of Eric Liddell after his running when he became a missionary to China. And let's be careful here. Christians should not be triumphalists. We of all people should know the reality of brokenness in this world. Here's a great quote from Amy Kenny. Are you able-bodied, or are you just temporarily non-disabled? If you live long enough, your body will experience disability in one way or another. Are you any less worthy of dignity and respect in those moments when your body and mind function differently from how it once did? Do you bear less of God's image? The truth is, everybody's ability is a temporary condition. The more you learn to live in the company of disability, the more you can come to embrace it when it comes to you. The point is this: the manyness of this church includes a manyness of ability and disability, of strength and weakness, of neurotypical and neurodiverse. It's a church both for the person who has 10 talents and the widow who has 2 small coins. And when you meet God face to face, he will not say, why were you not more like Eric Liddell? He will not say, why were you not more like Abraham Kuyper? Why were you not more like Mother Teresa? He will say, why were you not more like you? Tim Keller used to talk about the ancient Greek myth of Pandora's box. In Greek mythology, Pandora was the first woman created by the gods as punishment to humanity. She was given a box containing all of the world's evils, which she opened, releasing them into the world forever. And significantly, one of the evils in the box was work. So that's the Greeks. What about the Babylonians? The Babylonian creation myth is called Enuma Elish, and in it Marduk says, I will establish a savage man shall be his name. He shall be charged with the service of the gods, that we might be at rest. So to the Greeks, work is a curse. And to the Babylonians, work is about being a divine footstool. And sitting between them as a light to the nations comes verse 23 from our text. His master said to him, "Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter the joy of your master." Notice how the Christian idea is radical. Our calling is noble. Our work can be a joy. It can be a reflection of our talents and our joys, what makes you uniquely you, as we work alongside the Lord in the great drama of his redemption work everywhere. It's about bringing the gifts of how God has created you to work alongside God in his great work. Let that sink in. It's about bringing the gifts of how God has created you to work alongside God in his great work. And in doing that, there can be real joy for us, but also joy for God. Saint Irenaeus famously said, "The glory of God is a man fully alive." Finally, let's say a word about the sharp edge of warning at the end of this parable. I started out by saying that Jesus had hard words for the Jewish leaders because of how they had lost focus on what their calling actually was, to be a light to the nation. Let's listen to those words again. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with 10. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Central Baptist, we are inheritors of the call of God on his people. We have been grafted into the vine. As a church community, we have been called to be part of the drama of God's redemption everywhere. And the great risk for us is the same as the risk for the ancient people of Israel, that we focus on the wrong things and so bury the call. In my town, there's church after church that went this way. You can see them as you drive around the city. A church that is now a cafe, a church that's now a bar, a church demolished and replaced by housing. It is so easy to become focused on the wrong things. And how can you tell? I think in the end, they all look like trying to save ourselves. What about you as an individual reading this warning? Remember, this is not a message of fear. It is not about being cast into hell if you don't do enough by the final exam. It's instead an invitation to a life of meaning, where you bring the uniqueness of who you are, your abilities, your disabilities, your joy and your humanity, and offer that in the service of a good God and his great work. There's this great line in Chariots of Fire that captures it perfectly. Eric Liddell says to his sister, "I believe God made me for a purpose, but he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure." So what should we do with this warning? As for the worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. My suggestion is this: turn the page. Literally, turn the page. The very next chapter in Matthew begins to describe Jesus arrested, Jesus on trial, Jesus mocked and brutalized, Jesus crucified on a cross, Jesus going to a place of outer darkness with weeping and gnashing of teeth. The point is that when we one day give an account to Jesus for how we have spent our days, we will be standing in front of the very Master who has already paid the price for our sin and our stupidity and our loss of focus. In the words of Paul to the Ephesians, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this not from yourselves, it is a gift of God. Not by works, so that no one can boast. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works which God prepared in advance for us to do." Amen.